Have you ever wondered what really happened behind the camera between Taehyung and Jungkook? Is the secret that has been hidden by these two idols finally revealed? Find out now and prepare yourself for a story that will make your heart beat faster. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave your comments below if you feel surprised, touched, or have your own theories about them. What makes two big stars like Taehyung and Jungkook of BTS still look so close despite the pressure of world fame squeezing them every day? Is it just a casual friendship, or is there something deeper, more meaningful, and more emotional going on behind the scenes? Why does Jungkook's smile always look brighter when he's near Taehyung? And more surprisingly, what exactly does Taehyung often do to Jungkook so that he always looks happy, even in the darkest of times? Today, we uncover one layer at a time of the relationship between these two great stars, not through cheap gossip or baseless speculation, but through an in-depth look at their interactions, nonverbal expressions caught on camera, and surprising confessions that have not been highlighted enough. What you'll find on this news may change the way you look at them both forever. The world of K-pop has always harbored tense, stressful stories, but behind the glitter, such sincere human relationships are hidden. In Taehyung and Jungkook's case, this relationship is more than just friendship. It is about an emotional connection that is built through time, sacrifice, and small actions performed over and over again, which, without realizing it, save each other. You may remember when BTS performed in concert on their world tour, and the camera captured the moment when Jungkook seemed to cry backstage. But what was rarely noticed was who first approached him, patted him on the shoulder, and without much of a word, just sat down next to him. It was Taehyung. He didn't say anything, just kept silent, but his own presence seemed to be an anchor for Jungkook, who was being swayed by emotions. And as it turns out, this is what Taehyung often does to Jungkook. Unconditional presence, not just a hug in front of the camera or a funny interaction during a live broadcast, but a consistency known only to those closest to them. Taehyung is the one who will listen to Jungkook without interrupting. He's the one who'll text you in the middle of the night when he finds out Jungkook is stressed. He's the one who will secretly leave Jungkook's favorite food in his training room. He who, according to some internal sources, would come to Jungkook's room just to sit on the floor and accompany him to sleep when insomnia struck. The answer could be because it's too personal, too subtle, too emotional to be consumed as mere entertainment news. However, the longer we dig, the more it becomes clear that it is these actions that make Jungkook survive, keep smiling, and still display the best version of himself. And in the midst of the pressures of being a global idol, these simple acts have a tremendous impact. In one of the less highlighted interviews, Jungkook once said, "There's someone in this group who doesn't talk much, but is always there. And I'm thankful he never changed." The sentence just passes by, but for those who understand the dynamics of BTS, it is clear who is meant. When asked who he respects the most personally, Jungkook answered, "Taehyung. He may not know, but his presence often saves me." The statement seemed to open a gap into their world that had been tightly closed. How can a world idol, with all the escorts and media spotlight, still be able to build such an authentic and touching relationship? Let's go back to some key moments that may now feel different from this perspective. Remember when Jungkook got injured in one of the shows and forced himself to keep performing? It was Taehyung who looked at him with worried eyes. Not just because he was worried that his partner might get hurt more, but because he knew, perhaps he was the only one, how much pressure Jungkook felt not to let anyone down. And that night, after the concert was over, as the others were busy cleaning up their makeup and preparing to return to the hotel, Taehyung sat next to a silent Jungkook in a wheelchair. No camera, no fans. But for Jungkook, that's more than enough. The question may not be answered with certainty, but clearly, their relationship has formed the foundation that makes BTS more than just a music group. This is a family, and within that family, Taehyung plays an important role in keeping Jungkook mentally and emotionally stable. Interestingly, many fans are now beginning to realize these patterns. They made a compilation of videos, threads on social media, and analysis that further corroborated the narrative that Taehyung was Jungkook's only safe haven amid a brutal storm of popularity. Not a few ARMY who claimed to cry to see how the two strengthen each other behind the scenes. And the climax comes when Taehyung, in a very rare live session, mentions that he once felt useless, except when he can make others feel better. Is that a statement that indirectly refers to Jungkook? No one knows for sure, but the sentence contains a depth of emotion that is difficult to ignore. This news is not about romantic love, not about an ideal couple in the eyes of fans. It's about two humans who understand each other's wounds and choose to take care of each other. And often, things like this are even more touching than ordinary love stories. You might ask, how can someone like Taehyung, who is known to be eccentric, aloof, and mysterious, actually be the one who shows the most consistent love and attention? Isn't it usual that people like him will be more secretive? Taehyung is someone who, despite seeming indifference, absorbs all things secretly. He noticed Jungkook's mood swings just from the tone of his voice. He knows when to speak and when to be silent. And maybe only Jungkook can access Taehyung's most hidden side, and vice versa. Ultimately, it's not just Jungkook who benefits from this relationship. Taehyung also finds meaning in being someone who is needed. In a world where everything is fast-paced, stressful, and demanding, this relationship is one of the few things that keeps them human. That sometimes, being someone present is the greatest gift that can be given. That true happiness doesn't come from the cheers of thousands of people, but from one person who knows when you're not okay. And that, behind all the fame and fortune, these two young people save each other, every day, in silence. But not everyone sees this with the same glasses. Behind those sweet moments, subtle attentions, and genuine presence, some began to ask sharp questions, and even point fingers at their relationship as unnatural. Some voices began to echo from behind the scenes of the South Korean entertainment industry, questioning, has the closeness between Taehyung and Jungkook crossed professional boundaries? Are Taehyung's personal actions a manifestation of genuine affection between friends? Or is there a deeper layer deliberately covered by the agency? And this question does not come without foundation. Several former staffers who previously worked around their wards divulged that there was an unwritten warning from management to limit visual proximity between the two while on camera. Why should an agency that has been known for its warm approach to member interaction issue such a warning? Is it because of fear of public opinion? Or because they know something that the public does not yet know? One of the former stylist coordinators who has stopped working since 2021 said in an off-record interview that Taehyung and Jungkook's closeness was once a sensitive issue internally. It was even mentioned that there was an internal evaluation session that specifically addressed how their relationship was presented to the media. Doesn't this sound like a form of control over something too close to industrial convenience? Big agencies like HYB certainly have their own strategy in maintaining the image of their stars. But is it worth it for the strategy to trample on such strong emotional values between two human beings just for the sake of maintaining a safe commercial narrative? If there is indeed pressure from above for Taehyung and Jungkook to keep their distance in public, then we are witnessing clear evidence of how the entertainment industry can regulate even love between people. And we have to ask, how does that impact them mentally? Imagine if you had someone who was always there for you, who knew your most vulnerable side, yet you had to pretend not to get too close to her just because the camera was staring, because the public might misunderstand. Doesn't it hurt? Isn't that torture? This is the dark side of the entertainment industry that is rarely talked about. A side that forces the stars to be perfect puppets on stage, but numbs behind the stage. And what makes this even more tragic is the fact that the public is actually part of this system, adoring their closeness when it's funny, but quick to drop a verdict when it's deemed excessive. Social media is not a safe place. There are fan groups that are so militant against the theory that Taehyung and Jungkook have a hidden romantic relationship that they stalk, investigate, and impose their narrative on the public. On the other hand, there are also conservative groups that actually condemn their closeness, calling it a threat to cultural norms and values. In the middle of these two extreme poles, two humans named Taehyung and Jungkook are just trying to stay who they are. Are they really more than just friends? Or is the public just not ready to accept that affection between two men can be so deep, sincere, and emotional without having to be labeled or restricted? We live in an age when society is beginning to advocate for mental health, love without gender boundaries, and emotional authenticity. When two men show deep love for each other, they are drawn into a whirlpool of controversy. Does this mean that we are not really ready to accept forms of affection that are not in accordance with the standard norms? Some pop culture observers have even referred to Taehyung and Jungkook's relationship as a new code in Asian masculinity, a representation of how men can express love and care explicitly without having to lose their identity as men. But of course, this is not a narrative that is accepted easily in an environment that is still very conservative, and this controversy will not stop here. The more both try to keep their relationship natural, the harder the pressure from the outside comes to define it. It has even been speculated that one of the reasons Taehyung chose to take on solo projects and focus on the visual arts was because he wanted to get away for a while from the public spotlight that was too aggressive towards his personal relationships. There are certain moments when the camera captures the inexplicable look in Jungkook's eyes. There is restrained emotion, subtle tension, and sometimes a longing that is too real to deny. Have you seen the way Jungkook looks at Taehyung when he speaks? Have you seen how quickly Jungkook smiles as soon as Taehyung starts laughing? It's not an engineering thing. Many celebrities are pretending to be close for the camera, but no one can pretend to be so constant for years without cracking up. And they have never cracked. Rather, they continue to fill each other. Even when rumors, pressure, and speculation do not stop. Perhaps this is what is most provocative, that their relationship actually proves something that the industry and parts of society don't want to admit, that a deep emotional connection, even between two men, can exist, can last, and can be a strength. You can choose to ignore all of this. You can choose to refuse to see the depth of their relationship. But if you stop for a moment, if you really open your eyes and your heart, you will realize what Taehyung did to Jungkook repeatedly, with unwavering consistency, is the highest form of love in its purest form. No need for labels, no confirmation required, no need for a stage. And it is precisely here that the most disturbing explosions begin to appear. Many may not be ready to admit this publicly, but the conversations behind the industry say things are much more complicated. There is a growing theory, not just from die-hard fans, but also from insiders, that Taehyung and Jungkook are not just colleagues, nor are they just brothers in arms in the music industry. Some refer to it as emotional attachment that is too deep to interfere with management, even to the point of being categorized as a branding liability. That we're talking about the world of K-pop, where every expression, relationship, even seconds of interaction is calculated to make sure it stays within the allowed corridor. There is a narrative that wants to be controlled. And when Taehyung and Jungkook's closeness begins to attract more attention than group projects or individual promotions, the situation becomes uncomfortable for those in the seat of power. What happened then? Slowly, but consistently, the two were separated in official activities. Schedules that used to be linked to each other began to be distinguished. Seating positions that are usually next to each other in the event began to be randomized. Questions that concerned the personal relationship of the two in the interview began to be censored or diverted. More than one source mentioned that in mid-2022, there was a sudden internal meeting to discuss the fan dynamic between Taehyung and Jungkook that was considered out of control. Imagine, two men who only care about each other, discussed as a marketing threat because their closeness is considered to be disturbing public perception. Not only that, there was also an order to take down certain behind-the-scenes content that featured overly intimate interactions, even to the extent that Taehyung leaned his head on Jungkook's shoulder during filming breaks. All too risky, they say. Then the question is, at risk for whom? Are we currently living in a world where affection between two men is considered dangerous to trademark? Where can touch, laughter, or hugs only be justified if they occur between a man and a woman? Or is this all just a reflection of how chaotic the value system is that limits humanity only out of fear of perception? Even more provocatively, there are rumors, and this is not from one source, but from several people with different positions, that one of the main reasons for this tension is not only because of the dynamic between Taehyung and Jungkook, but rather because both refuse to pretend to stay away. They did not want to submit to the management's request to keep a little distance. They choose to be what they are. Stay close. Keep protecting each other. And because of this, the pressure begins to increase. Some even said that the separation of their solo promotions was done to dampen fan sentiment that began to focus BTS's entire narrative on their personal relationship. Not every army is comfortable talking about this. Some find this topic too sensitive, even taboo. But silence means consent. Silence means giving in to a system that has long dictated how an idol should act, feel, and love. Now imagine what it's like to be Taehyung, a man with a sensitive, artistic personality who just wants to love freely and give attention to the people he cares about, but is constantly pressured to explain that all this is just friendship. Imagine being Jungkook, who grew from a shy child to a grown man with many wounds behind a smile, and the only place where he could really be himself was by the side of the person he had to keep his distance in public. They may never be able to tell what really happened, but body language can't lie, and the public began to come to their senses. More surprisingly, a portion of the international fan base began to form communities that openly supported their relationships, whatever their form. They regard Taehyung and Jungkook as symbols of resistance to rigid social rules. Meanwhile, South Korea's conservative fan base has been increasingly vocal in urging the agency to straighten out the wrong perceptions and ask for clarification that their relationship is only professional. This mutual attraction turns into a battlefield of opinions. And if you think it's just two guys getting too close, you're wrong. It's about how systems, cultures, and the global entertainment industry treat human intimacy. Do all forms of love have to be compartmentalized? Is it just because these two are male idols that their closeness should be limited, watched, even denied? There is one statement from Taehyung that now feels very meaningful. In a seemingly ordinary live broadcast, he said, "I feel most at peace when I don't have to explain anything to anyone." Maybe he was talking about art, or maybe he was about his feelings. Jungkook once said in an interview, "I just want to be surrounded by people who don't ask me to change." Who has never asked you to change? Who accepted Jungkook with all his strangeness, his noise, his silence, and even his injuries? We all know the answer. We've all seen it, if we're being honest. And in the midst of all this, one thing becomes clear. If pure love, which does not harm anyone, should be forced to be silent simply because it goes against stereotypes, then it is not they who should change, but the world around them. You may be shaken now. There may be anger. There may be sadness. Maybe you feel this is unfair. Don't let that emotion just disappear. Write your comments ***, voice your opinion, and ***, share this story ***. The world needs more courage to accept love in any form. Taehyung and Jungkook have lived long enough in stressful silence. It is time for the public to not only be spectators, but advocates of safe spaces for anyone to love